Drew, is the store open right now? I didn't see anybody down there.
No, it opens in about an hour.
Oh, cool. Right on. Yeah. Yeah, great. We're just gonna wait for Kylee to jump on the call. Kristen's not going to be here today. But that's all right. And I've got a very mouthy puppy that we're dealing with right now who's just eating everything that she possibly can find in the house.
She'll chew on our shoes while they're on our feet.
Yes.
Yeah, classic. She's eating my Birkenstocks right now. It's pretty funny. Well, cool. There's Kylee. Awesome. Morning. Oh,
Drew looks so pro
really
with the shoe wall behind him.
Zoe, your Murakami cheat sheet for the novel was hilarious, by the way.
Thank you so much.
I'm a huge Murakami fan, but I always found like there are some themes running about.
There's some quirks, right?
Yeah.
Like it's simultaneously so lovable and then like so easily like my dream if I was more technologically advanced would be to create like a Murakami Twitter bot.
Jazz, cats, and incest. Yeah.
Yeah, really exactly. And then like Kafka for no reason.
Cool. Well, we've got quite a few mini topics for today. Maybe we should dive right in.
Get right into it.
Yeah. What do you think?
Let's do it. I love it.
Chitter chatter. I could use a minute to drink my coffee and have my breakfast since I've been up for over 2 hours and haven't done either of those things, but that's all right. Oh,
Bowie was up.
No.
Gosh, not the
She's
watch.
eating your watch.
Nothing is safe. She can like sense what things are like the nearest and dearest and most expensive. And she's like, yep, that's what I'm gunning for.
Okay. Does anybody have any insights? Why won't the puppy chew on her toys? Any like real chew toys that we give her? She won't even eat her bones now. She just wants to eat all of our shoes.
She likes to take the bones and hide them in weird places and then chew on shoes.
Oh.
So they use them to explore their world. So there's that.
What was that, Virginia? I missed that.
I said they use their mouth to actually explore their world.
I relate to that.
That makes total sense.
So what I did with my border Rousey, she's a year now, is I taught her how to retrieve shoes because she really liked them. So like we worked really hard with just retrieving shoes and socks. And then so now she thinks if she brings us shoes and socks, then it's a good thing and she gets treats. So that's my recommendation. Instead of like enjoying chewing on it, try and train her to bring them to you and then reward her.
That's smart. We've been doing a lot of drop it training or leave it training.
She's really good at it. She listens.
Yeah.
She listens really well.
It's almost like she'll pick things up just so that she could drop them and get treats.
Yes. So that Zhushka did the same thing. And I realized because she was outsmarting me, she knew if she picked it up and then dropped it, she would get rewarded.
Yeah. I feel like she's training us more than anything.
Right. So I stopped like rewarding her for leave it. And now she just does it. But I think she kind of realized she was like, oh man, like that doesn't work anymore. But yeah, they train you for sure.
Aussies, man, too smart for their own good.
I refuse to be trained by a 14-week-old puppy. All right, well, let's dive in. Cool. Our first question of the day is on injuries. How do you cope with the long-term injury and how do you reframe expectations while you're coming back? I think Kylee might want to start us off with this one. Yay, Kylee.
Yay, Kylee.
I was like getting the dog's bones because they were
Coach Lotzi looked fired up over there.
Yeah, he was. So so I guess I'll start with, I got injured. The first time I got injured was in college, and that was a big kind of like, growing up, running was like a huge part of my identity. And so my freshman year of college, when I was running, I had I got a blood clot in my leg, and was out for almost a full running season, and never ended up figuring out what the injury was caused by. But definitely made me, you know, really, it was a point where it was a very big struggle, because I, it was trying to fit into the team, and felt like I had lost, everything I had worked so hard for. Anyways, flash forward, I had never gotten injured again until a couple of years ago. I got a serious foot injury, and had to get foot surgery, and has been an up and down journey since then. And so I'm still kind of struggling with my own injury stuff right now. And I think that has caused me to have to take a look at, like, what does running mean to me? What do I use running for in my life? And, are there other things that I have in my life to kind of keep me grounded in that? And to be honest, like, when it's such a huge part of your identity, it can be hard to kind of figure that out sometimes. But in regards to like what is, I guess, kept me going, and what I kind of have turned to is, number one, like, having a coach has been really awesome. So David Roach is my coach, and just like having somebody there to, ask about cross training ideas, or like, if I'm feeling stressed, or just feeling, I guess, like giving up or something, that person is there for you, and they're there to support you. So I'd encourage you all to, not take advantage, but what I mean, like in regards to connect with your coach, and really try to lean on them, because injuries aren't easy. I think it's important to recognize that, yeah, we can say like, yeah, be positive and look towards the future, but they're still like recognizing that they're not easy, and there's that part of you that's kind of missing a little bit. I think is a good thing. And then figuring out like ways to motivate yourself throughout the process. So focusing on the things that you can control. And so for me, I've really focused on, what cross training can I do? And then what injury recovery type things can I maximize on? So I've seen quite a few like PTs and like therapists and things like that in regards to like massage and whatnot, but I hadn't really found anyone that was working for me until recently. So I would encourage you, if you're somebody that has struggled for a while with injury, don't give up on trying to figure out like what the root of the issue is. And I do believe that there's like someone out there for everyone in regards to like whether that's strength, or whether that is, a PT or somebody that's going to help you with figure out what the root of that issue is. And then also don't forget about like support crew in regards to like nutrition, therapy, because it can be really really hard on the mind, as I was saying. Like if there's a big emotional component there, reach out to friends, and then talk to a therapist too. And then nutrition wise, I think that plays, for a lot of athletes that I work with, that does oftentimes play a big role in an injury cycle. So consideration of making sure that you are covering that base as well in regards to like underfueling or nutrient deficiencies, especially with bone injuries for sure. So that's kind of just a few things that I had. Again, I think it's important to recognize that never going to be easy, but staying focused on what you can control, and leaning on your coach and then looking forward and trying to keep motivated on, ultimately, trying to run again. So.
Yeah, no, I would like to kind of add to what Kylie's saying. It all makes total sense. Injury isn't rare in the sport of running, right? So I don't know a whole lot of people that really push the boundaries of what they're physically capable of and don't every now and then experience injury. Granted, not all of us are having like ACL repair. Some of us do, but most of us, an injury could be something like plantar fasciitis or IT band syndrome that limits our ability to give it our all. And so when it comes to coping with injury, whatever that injury is, important to know that you're not alone. Like this is a very unfortunately normal thing. Running is not an easy sport. Like it is demanding and challenging for your body. So that's important. Also understand that I guess when it comes to, I guess myself, that when it comes to coping with an injury, it's like taking time to understand like what has happened to me. I need to understand whether you're talking to your therapist or whoever, understanding what exactly has happened to you, learn from it, and then moving forward. I've always liked a timeline. I want to know kind of exactly what to expect for recovery. I want to know what to expect for physical therapy. I want to know what to expect, like when I can maybe start to run again and what that looks like and what to expect. And so really having like a timeline of expectations, and just so you kind of know what's coming down the pipe, I think is so important when you're talking about reframing and I guess those expectations for your return.
Yeah, I think I love that idea of a timeline because like I'm someone that's very much like, I want to know what's happening. The caveat to that is that like all things about being a human, recovery is rarely totally linear. So like making sure you have plenty of flexibility and room for forgiveness and self-compassion as well, because sometimes adhering to, I think so often we either end up getting injured or delaying recovery because we're too strictly adhered or married to a specific timeline rather than just being like, hey, this thing's going to heal, on its own schedule, and like knowing what like having that, like Drew said, like expectations for PT and like, trying to just be really conservative and understanding that sometimes it's going to feel like 2 steps forward, 1 step back, 3 steps sideways, and a big jump forward. Like it's going to feel all over the place. And just like having room and self-compassion for that. Another little caveat I want to just add to the whole discussion is that like cross training can be a really amazing way to stay in touch with your athletic self while injured, but we really want to caution people from cross training themselves into an oblivion, because a lot of times we'll see highly motivated athletes push hard and get injured, and then their obvious next response is like, oh my god, I'm going to get so into stationary biking and I'm going to like just bike all the time. Like this is like, that's one of my impulses when injured, right? Like, you're highly motivated, you don't want to lose fitness, so you just like hit it really hard with the cross training. And if you're injured, a lot of times that means your body is saying like, hey, we need to take a huge step back. And so like really pay attention to that and don't try to make up for not running by filling your life with like other stuff. Like if your body is telling you, I need more space, give it space. Don't try to fill it in with like more strength training, more cross training, more. Like use that as an opportunity to like investigate, mental health, investigate your nutrition, investigate like all these methods of self-care. But just know that like, it takes like 2 weeks for detraining to happen. So like you can take days off here and there, like frequently, in order to prevent injury, and that will just help us advance in our training, right? Like there are occasions where taking time off helps us stay more consistent in the long haul, and that's kind of the heuristic we're working with. If you're looking at a very long-term injury, just embrace the idea that your fitness is going to change. It's always ebbing and flowing, right? And that's totally fine. Like you are not going to be in peak race shape every day of your life. That would not be healthy or sustainable. And then a lot of times having that reset, like, really kind of going back, taking time off running, taking time off, like intensive training generally can a lot of times even allow like expressions down to the epigenetic level to come out. And we'll oftentimes see these big these big times off for athlete, big down periods act as like a reset for huge breakthroughs down the line. Like I've seen that in both of our athletic lives. We've seen that in the lives of countless athletes as well. So even though it really sucks to be in that place, just take that time, take that space for yourself, because you could really be setting yourself up for a breakthrough. But if you use like time off from running as an opportunity to like, you don't want to get into a cycle of self-punishment with cross training, strength training, anything like that. You want things to feel good. You want it to feel like an active pulling back, and just like embrace that fitness changes. Like that's fine. That's part of being a person. Embrace listening to your body and giving it what it needs, because that is ultimately going to lead to a speedier recovery and better fitness down the road than just trying to like hold things very tightly and like cling to that fitness in ways that's not productive long term.
Yeah, Zoe, that was well said. And I think that we're kind of getting at some of the mental emotional side of coping with an injury and reframing expectations for just the comeback after injury. You know, I think that it's really important to recognize that a lot of injuries in running happen because the body meets that point where there's been, you know, too much stress and the body can't handle anymore. And athletes definitely have that tendency to want to fill the space with more athletic pursuits of a different kind that generally that's not beneficial for the healing process. Mm-hmm. It's much more beneficial to take space, to take full rest. If you're going to ride the bike, if that's been approved by your doctor or your PT, depending on the extent of your injury, that's fine. But, you know, don't be seeking out workouts on the bike. Don't be riding out of the saddle. Don't be putting more stress on a system that doesn't need more stress, a system that needs rest. And it's really important for athletes to understand that. And I see that as something that continually presents a challenge for most athletes who are having their first, maybe their second injury. They're too attached to wanting to keep their fitness, but not really realizing that sometimes there's a really big benefit from that downtime. And I think that also fill the space. Your first injury, your second injury, when you have a couple of weeks that you have to take off or just a few days, it's a big opportunity for you to think about how you identify with running. What are the other things that you have in your life? Running isn't all there is. I am a really big believer in that. Don't make running the only thing that you have. That is a recipe for mental distress when you're unable to run. So build your support network, get into some other activities, maybe some hobbies that you enjoy, creative pursuits, things that keep your mind active, that keep you busy and keep you thinking about other things than your injury. I think that can be really helpful. You know, there are a couple questions in the
basically James asked, what do you do when you get conflicting info from different PTs and doctors? Drew says it's very common. Knowing this, try to find a PT or whatever professional that is a runner themselves, which I think is excellent advice. Like having someone that understands your context. I think a lot of people have had the experience of seeing a doctor or someone else who just like doesn't get it with regards to the running. And I think it is so like, for me, like even when I'm looking for like a therapist, like a mental health professional, I really try to make sure they understand my relationship to sport, because I need people to understand that context when they're giving me advice and information about my mental and physical health. And that's just very important, like for all of us. Like you are an athlete, look for people in every aspect of your life who understand that about you.
Oh man, and I think it's very obvious sometimes when a PT doesn't know anything about running, because I'll get an athlete that'll come to me and the PT will be like, run 1 mile this week, and if it feels okay, run 2 miles next week, and if it feels
that's
okay,
that's a 100% increase.
3 miles
do not
week.
Do that.
And just these ridiculous return to running prescriptions that make absolutely no sense. In most cases, you start with a run walk. You really break it down. It depends completely upon how long you've been off of running. If you've been off for a week or two, generally, you can kind of ease back in with avoiding the run walk routine. But for people who have been out for a few months, it's really important to be very calculated about that. It's not run 1 mile every other day, and if it works out, then add a mile to every run the next week and try again. Like we have a very specific way of doing that.
Bananas return to run programs.
Yeah. So sometimes as a coach, I'm like, okay, to an athlete, like I'd actually ask you to check with your PT if we can go do a run walk routine or go through this in a structured way, kind of what Drew is mentioning. If you're out for 2 months, we're building back for 2 months. You probably won't get back to where you were for 2 months, maybe more. So it's really important to recognize that when we're talking about expectations for the return, we need basically to think about how long you were off running and then continue to build you back over that same amount of time, if not a little bit more, depending on the extent of the injury.
And what type of injury,
yeah.
and like what, it just like is so dependent on so many things. And I think the one thing that isn't dependent is that like being frustrated with how slow coming back can be will not make you faster, right? Like so much of recovering correctly is accepting where you're at and not pushing things, because pushing is what tends to slow the recovery process, rather than just saying like, hey, this is where I'm at today, and we're just going to take this process as it comes. If you're looking too far ahead and you're like, well, I really thought I'd be there, so I'm just going to train, or I'm going to act like I'm already, a month ahead in this recovery process. That's typically where we see athletes shortchanging themselves and setting themselves back.
And maybe the final word on this is that when you go to a PT, you build a connection with somebody who you feel like is a trusted resource, ideally somebody who understands running, the impact forces that running have on the body. And maybe they understand the events that you're doing. When they give you prescriptions for maintaining that injury, for building strength back to prevent the injury in the first place, if it's stretching, strength work, mobility, whatever it may be, maybe it's a rest prescription. I expect you as my athlete to continue with that work throughout the process as we build back. When we finally figured out where an area of weakness is, that's an area that has to continually be maintained for an indefinite amount of time. So, for me, like always, it's my feet are an issue. So like when I go to my PT and she gives me a prescription, and although my feet don't really hurt very often, still every day, stretch my calves, roll my calves, work on strengthening my glutes. Like that never goes away, because when you've identified an area of weakness that maybe is going to flare up in a period of training where you're pushing yourself and pushing your potential, you need to have your bases covered there, because that's going to be the first area to go. So I really want to say that is super, super important. You don't stop these things once the pain is gone. You need to pay attention to them all the time. Should we move on to our second question, Zoe? What do you think?
I love that. Just know that if you're struggling with long-term injury, like we see you. Thanks for being part of our community, and we will get through this.
Yeah, totally. Man, it took me a long time to get over my foot stuff, like well over a year. But with patience and a lot of, trying not to be judgmental to yourself about that, it can really help, and exploring other outlets that you have available to you other than running. All right, cool. This is a question about, I guess, mountain running. When doing a big mountain run, like the 4-pass loop or Pawnee Buchanan, is there such a thing as too slow? By the time you add up some power hiking and taking a break at the top of the pass to enjoy a snack and the views, it sometimes takes me upwards of 8 to 10 hours to complete runs like these. Should I be trying to focus on keeping myself running as much as possible, or does it really matter if it takes me all day and I take in a view for my lunch or a break? Such a good question. I really love this question.
Yeah, I think, for me, it really depends on your training and what your goal is with that big mountain day, right? So like Pawnee Buchanan and 4-pass loop are very mountainous, 25 plus mile loops, or actually
Colorado,
Pawnee Buchanan's like
known
24.
Colorado loops.
Known big Colorado loops. Like 4-pass loop is 27 miles. And like 8 to 10 hours is a freaking fast time on that, actually. And I think it just like, it totally depends. So like some things to think about when you're timing your big mountain days are you prepared for the whatever specific demands you're putting on yourself? A specific demand could be time on feet. Like if you're stretching a day out to being like 15 hours, you're putting a lot of stress on yourself just by being standing up for that long, you know? Like
Yeah.
even if you're going slower and you're taking things easy at a certain point, just the stress of like being, you know, upright and moving for that long, there's like a push and pull, right? Like if you go too hard, you need to have trained for the specific stress of going harder on a mountain loop. If you go easier, you need to have trained for like time on feet side of things. And you need to make sure that you're still fueling like a boss, no matter how hard you're going. I think you have to put this in the context of your larger training goals as well. Like, let's say you're training for a big mountain day and like that is your end game, then like there's kind of, you should go as fast or as slow as is enjoyable for you. It's your day. You should get what you want out of it. If what you want out of it is to eat PB&Js at 12,000 feet and just enjoy the views, that is an excellent goal. That is an excellent ambition. You should have trained for that so that you can maximally enjoy it. What we don't want to do is do days like that. Like if you were training for, you know, let's say like Leadville or Western States, like a faster 100, if you're doing slower mountain days, that's not going to be really great preparation for an important A race. But if that is the end goal in and of itself, then that's excellent. And that's not to say that even if you have like a big A race on the schedule that you can't still have fun mountain days, you can. But there is always going to be a risk benefit and kind of trade-off analysis in your training, because essentially power hiking for 10 hours is not great race prep for, you know, it's just not great race prep because it's going to put a lot of stress on your body, and it's not going to help a lot with running economy, strength. It just kind of is essentially training time on feet, which is already a pretty trainable metric anyway. So it just doesn't give us a lot of benefit for the amount of stress it puts on our bodies. However, again, taking into account that like you don't want to just like make training this arduous process of always hammering things out super fast. Like you want to enjoy things. So like all of my answers, it's a trade-off, and it totally depends on what kind of fitness you're bringing into this goal, what you want to get out of this goal, and what your goals look like on a 1 to 5 year spectrum as well. But I would say that it's like totally great to spend a full long day in the mountains, as long as it's not detrimental to your training or health, and you need to work with your coach to decide those things.
Yeah. And I think also I want to add that there's some caveats to this. An 8 to 10 hour training run in the context of a normal week
that
of
is not
training
normal, by the way. That is like something you need to
much.
train for.
It's way too much. Typical runner is training 8 to 10 hours a week. And that's, you know, an intermediate to advanced runner. If you're pushing a 10-hour run, that's already, you know, double the training volume that you'd normally have. Most elite athletes aren't training more than 12 hours a week, 15 at the most of total running volume. So we have to be really careful about that. Off the cuff, 8 to 10 hour, even more than like 5-hour long runs should be talked about with your coach beforehand. It's entirely too much volume to not have a conversation with your coach about. And I think our coaches are going to be pretty hardline on that and want you to not do that, because the stress concentration there, as Zoe said, it could be very risky for injury. If you're thinking about doing like a big adventure or something, plan it out, give it the training that it deserves, taper down the week, maybe 14 days before the event, so you're feeling fresh, and then go out and have a good time. Whether that means going for a fast time for you or taking in the views, I think that's completely up to the athlete and the athlete's goals. But again, if you're thinking about something like that, let's really be careful about the time on feet. I think all of our coaches are pretty mindful of that, especially when prescribing, like, say, longer runs, like we talked about in the last call. Anything that's, you know, a few hours in length or more, you know, the more mountainous the terrain is, the longer you're out there, So we really need to be cognizant of that. And yeah, have fun, adventure, and just make sure that when you're doing it, you're being mindful of that stress concentration, because even if you're doing a lot of power hiking, it is an exceptionally long day, 8 to 10 hours. With my athletes, I'm treating that as a race. So
yeah, for sure. And like it, you know, we have a specific understanding of the 4-pass loop because it's like in our backyard and we've done it. But I think, you know, as with any adventure, it's up to you to find that sweet spot between like, you don't want to push so hard that you don't enjoy it or that you're just like getting injured. But you also don't want to go so slow that unless the goal is to just like have a fun hike, it's just up to every athlete to determine what that sweet spot is for themselves, and how it benefits their training and the ways it takes away from their training, because everything about training is just like risk mitigation, risk management, stress concentration. So just understand that there is a trade-off to everything, and that's why you have a coach.
Yeah. Drew or Kylie, did you guys want to comment on that one, or should we move on to our next question?
I'm good. You guys crushed it, unless Kylie has something to add.
Cool.
Imagine Drew running for 8 hours would be amazing. I would love to see that.
Guys,
Drew, you have to come out and do the 4-pass loop.
Yeah. Oh man, it's such an epic loop. If any of you guys are interested in that one, I would recommend it, but it's something you got to train for.
It's a big day.
I'm going to come out there and do that just because I see all y'all's photos on Instagram and it looks like heaven to me, and I want to look like I'm in heaven too. So one day I will make it there.
We're doing it. High altitude microcosm training camp.
You already are in heaven. Look at that shoe wall behind you.
It's true. That's just his house.
Oh, he's at Rush Running.
I'm just kidding.
All right. This is a great question for Kylie. Is there a way to optimize my post-run nutrition routine?
Yeah, so I feel like I talk about this one every day. So hopefully it'll be a good answer for everyone. So when we're looking at post-run nutrition, I think usually the first thing that I have people consider is how, like, what situation they're in regards to like what type of workout did they just do, and how long was something that you did, and then when's your next workout, and looking at that from a timing perspective. So there's a lot of info out there about the 30 to 60 minute like window of recovery, and should you stress out about getting something in for that. And so normally what I say is I like to provide some guidelines for people. If you did a hard workout, or if you did a long run that is over 90 minutes, if you have a double day, or if you have like 2 longer days in a row, so like say you have a long run and then like a medium long run the next day, those are the instances where you want to pay attention to that 30 to 60 minute window of recovery. Not saying that the other runs that you shouldn't get something in, but you don't necessarily have to like stress out if you eat something like 90 minutes after versus, 30 to 60 minutes after. And the reason why we want to try to get something in within that 30 to 60 minute window on those particular days that I mentioned is to, number one, like maximize our recovery so that we're able to come back strong and feeling good for the next training session. Number two, making sure that we're able to maximize nutrition and like replace glycogen stores, kind of help with muscle recovery as well. And so doing that within the window is really going to help with those things on those particular days. One point I want to make is if you do have something within that 30 to 60 minute window, that doesn't mean that you like skip your next meal as well, which I do encounter with people sometimes. They're like, I ate a post-run snack, but then I skipped lunch. So we don't want to do that. You eat the post-run recovery thing, and then you also have a meal within a couple of hours afterwards. So that's kind of a note on the timing of things. And then in regards to maximizing what you're having, I normally have like particular guidelines in regards to like how many calories, carbohydrates, and protein, what you're looking for if you're using a post-recovery run snack. So the snack would be 45 to 60 grams of carbs, 15 to 20 grams of protein, and then it's about 240 to 340 calories. In regards to like, if it is something where you're going to have a meal after versus a snack, then you would want to make that a little bit larger, but still ensuring that, yes, I'm getting in that amount of protein and I'm having that carbohydrate as well with it. A big mistake that I see is just having like a protein shake post workout. You don't want to just have protein post workout, because having some carbohydrate with that actually maximizes muscle protein like recovery and resynthesis. So you do want to make sure you have some carb there, and then the carb is also going to help with replenishment of glycogen stores. So you want to make sure that both of those things are there, not just like you have protein and water and then you think that that's going to like maximize recovery. And then I guess in regards to like what choices are good, I think a lot of athletes in the situations that I mentioned, like a hard workout day or long run day, sometimes lose their appetite post run. And so making sure that you have, I kind of call it like the post run recovery plan. So you have like one or two things that are like your go-tos for post run recovery. So for some people that might be like liquid nutrition, or like a smoothie. And then another thing that I offer is like in the winter, like doing a soup that might meet those guidelines, and like creating a big batch of that soup and freezing that soup. And then when you have like your long run or something, you get one of those little soup things out and you have it ready for you when you get back. Other people might be fine with like whole food options versus a liquid option. So making sure that, you know, you have things available. I think that's one of the biggest challenges with people that I work with, is not necessarily that they don't know what to do. It's like that planning piece and having those things available. So making sure that like when you go to the store, that, you know, you have those items available for yourself that are good for recovery or good for pre-run, you know, making sure that you're intentional about the things that you have on hand. And then, yeah, I think it would be also remiss to like talk about this without talking about like hydration and electrolytes too. So making sure that you are focusing on replacement of those fluids. So for every hour of exercise that you're doing, you know, aiming for like 16 to 20 ounces of fluid replacement. And then if it is a particularly like hot day or you're a salty sweater, maybe you want to consider having like a noon tablet or something post run to just help with replenishment of those things. So hopefully that was like organized and like everyone could follow what might be the best technique for post run recovery optimization.
I love that.
Yep. Great job, Kylie. Yeah, that was very clear. Yeah, awesome.
I feel like I learned a lot.
Super important. Very important. I really like the emphasis on when you have your post-run snack that you don't skip a meal.
Yeah, I feel like that's huge and can be challenging.
Yeah, totally. But again, you know, as athletes, we have to take ownership of these things. And if you feel yourself getting off track, missing a meal here or there, and you've got the awareness that you've done that, it is vital that you course correct as quickly as possible. And if you're one of my athletes and you're struggling with that, we're going to reduce workouts and things like that, because we really want to avoid the same day energy deficits.
Yeah, I always tell my athletes I would rather them miss a run than miss a meal, because if you do a run, like if the choice is like, should I eat lunch or do this run? If you do the run without having eaten lunch, you're upping your risk for injury, worst case scenario. And then best case scenario, you're doing a run that's like not that productive for your training because you're under fueled. So yeah, fuel is like foundational for getting the runs in.
Awesome. Let's move on. We've got a running through the ages question. And it's thoughts on how running expectations in training might look and feel different based on an athlete's age.
I love this. I think the big things I think about when I'm coaching more masters category athletes are that at certain points in our lives, we can handle more or less volume. As you age, we redistribute volume in a way that emphasizes things like cross training and strength training slightly more than just running the miles. And we use those things to support our training. A lot of that is associated with, as you age, you tend to lose muscle mass. So rather than just continuing to pound out more and more miles, we support the mileage we're already doing with cross training so that we are stronger and more resilient, so that we're getting more out of the volume we're already doing. And I think that that's something that's really important, is like, strength training is amazing and important for athletes of all ages and all levels, but especially as you age, because muscle loss is a byproduct of aging, adding in more and more strength training. I think this is something that I really urge my athletes in their 50s and particularly their 60s and beyond to get curious about and start to embrace in their training. Also looking into lower impact cross training options, like cycling, swimming, aqua jogging, skiing, hiking, things like that. Just ways to like maintain health, like a healthy, like keep movement fun, keep embracing being a master's level athlete fun, while doing things that are they're not less physically demanding, they're less impactful, and they're just going to support the impact we're already doing rather than adding on unproductive stress.
Yeah, I also like kind of helping athletes change their expectations on recovery time and on stress as well. One of the things with kind of masters aged athletes is that sometimes it takes a little longer to recover after a big effort. And I also see that it takes a little bit longer for these athletes to recover after really stressful days at work or really stressful life events. So I really try to take that into account by either adding in extra rest and starting to emphasize with those athletes that when they don't feel 100%, that they rest rather than force a workout through. The same thing with an athlete, a younger athlete, is that we really want to emphasize quality of the miles that we run. So in order to increase the quality of runs, sometimes for masters athletes, it means when life is stressful, when sleep is bad, when there's a big event that, causes all sorts of stress. Sorry, Zoe, you're kind of distracting me.
Sorry.
That it's vital to take a little extra rest, especially after tough work days where athletes tend to come home, they get a little stiff. Maybe they've been on their feet a lot. Sometimes it's best to just take that next day as a low impact training day, supplement cross training instead of running, emphasize a longer warm up or mobility work. And I think that with those athletes, they have a really big aerobic capacity already because they've been involved with the sport for a really long time. This is at least in the case of most of the masters athletes that I coach. So overemphasizing any one training day is usually never successful. In fact, de-emphasizing each day or the weekly volume and just having the athletes feel better every time they're out there. I tend to de-emphasize a little bit the 5 days of running or 6 days of running a week that for younger athletes is really vital. And I do supplement that with low impact work, specifically the bike training. I think that is really helpful for adding volume, continuing to build the aerobic system while lowering impact forces.
We've also seen a lot of masters category athletes like come in starting training in their late 50s, early 60s, which is so awesome and amazing. And we have athletes that are running PRs, in their 60s, like in their late 60s, early, you can do amazing things if you just stay consistent and train to your current ability level, right? Like trying to train, and this is like true for athletes of all ages. Don't try to train like whoever you follow on Strava or Instagram. Train like your best self. And that is how you will, be that person who's like PRing well into their 60s.
Yeah,
like having
totally.
the best running days of their lives.
Yeah, and I think it's really important for those athletes to kind of just adjust the expectations that they have of themselves, especially trying not to compare themselves to younger versions of themselves, especially for those athletes who have had really long careers in running and things like that. It's important to recognize that like as you get older, you will slow down, but the benefits are that your aerobic system doesn't just completely collapse. Actually, it stays quite strong
and quite trainable.
Yeah, well into your 50s, and sometimes beyond. So it's really actually amazing, even with some on the cusp masters aged athletes winning 100-mile races and things like that. Leadville 100 is a particular one that comes to mind for me for ultra runners. So yeah, I would, if you're kind of a master's aged athlete out there, I would really recommend emphasizing your recovery. If your sleep isn't that good, again, overemphasize the recovery. Make sure that the work that you're doing on a day-to-day basis is appropriate and aligns with how you feel. Continue to kind of develop your expectations day to day on your running. Really listen to your body feedback. If something's not feeling good, reduce. And that includes time, time on feet. If you've got a really demanding job, know that stress crosses over into the running side of things. And sometimes necessitates that you back off of the running a little bit. And I really like helping my athletes develop those kind of understandings and perspectives.
And you can be an athlete at any age. Like we get so many emails from people that are like, oh, I'm, this age, so I'm not a real athlete. And like, you can be a boss ass athlete at absolutely any age. It's all about scaling your training so that it makes sense for you and your current physical ability. You can be an amazing, just don't limit yourself because of age. Train smarter because of your age and like respect where you're at, but that doesn't mean that you're any less of an athlete. Totally. And I think it's important to embrace your athletic self through all phases and seasons of life.
Yeah. All right. I think we've got time for one more.
Yay.
And this is our shoe tying question. And it goes, I've seen a lot of articles talking about the best way to tie your shoes for running. Some even claim that tying your shoes the wrong way or too tightly can cause injuries. Is this legit or does it not really matter? Drew, I'm sending it over to you. You got the shoe all behind you.
Yeah. So all of us are shoe experts to some degree because we all wear them when we run.
I'm wearing some right now.
Yeah, good. There you go. The answer is yes. Obviously, lacing your shoes incorrectly or too tight can definitely exacerbate aches, pains, or even create them. When we use one of these big honkin' Hoka 10-9 shoes. So the idea is that when you're lacing up a shoe, that your feet, depending on the day that you run or depending on the workout that you did the day before, the idea is that your feet swell and contract throughout the day. And so making sure that you've got plenty of, room in a shoe for blood flow to do its thing naturally is key. So when I am working with athletes or selling shoes, the idea is that every time you lace a shoe, you are unlacing the shoe, not slipping it on, not slipping it off, none of that stuff. But unlace your shoe, loosen up the eyelets at the top. And then when you start lacing, you're starting to lace at the base of the shoe, the most distal end of the shoe, and then tighten each eyelet up to like a moderate, not tight, but not loose kind of thing. Just a really like moderate, way to describe it, feeling all the way up until you lace. A lot of people get in trouble when they lace the top of their shoe, the laces like right in the middle here, too tightly. That's your dorsal arch, the top of your arch where like the apex on the bottom of your arch comes up. That's the top of the foot, bony top of your foot. So many, blood vessels and veins roll through there. And if that's too tight and you don't accommodate for swelling, you'll start to get tingly toes, or worse, you'll start to feel aches, maybe strains and ligaments in the metatarsal bed, which can eventually turn to stress reactions or stress fractures. And so I'm sure that I hope I'm not missing the point of this question. The point is that don't lace your shoes too tight. Obviously, it's probably better to lace them a little looser than to lace them too tight. You can always tighten your shoe or allow for the swelling to take place, but you can't always just loosen it up after you've already created an issue, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think Zach is asking if there are any specific lacing techniques. It's actually something I learned from Drew is, and maybe you can demonstrate because you actually have a shoe in your hand, but you can skip, you can like unlace your shoe all the way, and then you can skip eyelets in the middle to alleviate pressure under specific like crosses, right? So instead of letting the laces go across the shoe, you keep them parallel through the eyelets and then cross them. I think Drew is going to demonstrate, but that's a way, like if you have, like I have one pair of shoes that randomly just on my left foot, just one pair of shoes puts too much pressure on my dorsal arch. So I actually have the laces skip several crosses in the middle so that it's like secure at the front of the foot and then it's secure through the heel, but there's no specific pressure on top of the shoe. Another trick I really like, and this is something you can Google or Drew can demonstrate. Yeah, see how you just skip through there. Drew is demonstrating. Yeah. And you can, so if you notice on a lot of shoes, there'll be a last eyelet that typically when you get the shoe from the factory, last eyelet. What you'll do, and you can Google this because I'm not going to describe it super well, is you can create a smaller loop that goes through that last eyelet and then use that loop to secure the shoe closer to the heel. And this is something that if you're someone that feels like your heel comes in and out of the back of the shoe, it'll help anchor your heel into the shoe in a way that feels a lot better. I have very narrow feet, so I do this with every pair of shoes I have. I also do it with the shoes where I skip eyelets on top of the shoe, and it adds security to the back of the shoe when there's an alleviation of stress on the front of the shoe. And we can, when we post this on YouTube, Facebook, things like that, we can add some links to other online demonstrations of this, but like get creative with your lacing and know that it like, feet are weird and it's okay to like lace all of your shoes in a totally bananas different way. That's just being smart. And there's lots of ways to kind of just like hack your way through it. But if you have any kind of tingling, numbness, things like that, you don't want that. And like Drew said, it's very important not to slide your shoes on and off. Like you want to relace them every single time, because depending on when you put your shoe on throughout the day, your foot is going to be various degrees of swollen. Yeah.
I would also add that I do feel like that shoe tying method that Drew just kind of did there with the using the extra hole at the top is the superior way to tie your shoes if you are a trail runner. That'll keep your foot secure, specifically helps on the downhill so your toes don't plug into the front of your shoe when you're running down steep grades, which can lead to not only bruised toes over the course of a long run, but can also lead to a lot of blisters and things like that. So securing the heel is really vital. That's something that I learned a few years ago and I thought makes a huge difference. Another thing is that kind of came to mind for me was if you are running on a course that is really wet, what happens when you run through water is your shoes get super loose and your feet just start sliding everywhere. In those moments, you stop, you tie your shoes tighter to secure to your feet in order to prevent blisters and bruising of your toes on downhills. I think specifically that tying method really, really helps to secure the foot, especially in a wet shoe. So if you guys don't know that method, we will post a video of it. I think somebody I've seen has posted a good video of how to do that. And it really helps. I recommend it. And you can even go as far as to put extra holes in the top of your shoes. That's something that I do because my shoes don't have them. So I will just carve holes in there because it's so important to have that foot secure, keep the heel down.
Yeah. And also just like plug for local running stores, go get a professional fit, go get a gait analysis, try on a lot of shoes. I think that can be hugely, hugely helpful in just making sure that you have the correct equipment for you and you're not just buying whatever, Instagram or like your running partner is trying to sell you.
Yeah. I love the on shoe, the try on comfortability.
TJ has seen me try on a lot of different shoes.
Yeah. Well, awesome. Well, thanks guys. That's kind of all we had for today.
That's not correct.
Oh,
one last question.
Mustache, the stupid mustache.
The last question. Can growing a mustache make us better runners?
Absolutely.
Does it make you more aerodynamic?
Yes.
The answer is unconditionally yes.
Yes.
We have seen this through Steve Prefontaine. And it's just the science is in mustaches make you faster. There's no way around it.
I'm waiting for Drew to grow his mustache. Come on,
Listen,
Drew.
I love my wife, and so I would like to sleep in the same bed as her, and it won't happen with a mustache, is what I've been told. So we'll
see. This one started as a joke that just like never went away.
Good thing you have a comfortable couch at your house, Drew, in your living room.
I do, a very, very comfortable couch.
We don't have a comfortable couch, so
yeah,
Zoe tolerates me.
Tolerated. Yeah, there's some great mustaches on this team. And I don't know if you've ever been curious about growing out a mustache, like man, woman, like give it your best shot.
Big ups to Simon. He's had a good stash growing for the last couple of calls.
It's so good. It makes his smile like so epically radiant.
That's hilarious, Zach.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm a few Magnum PI. He had a great stash.
I feel like it's hard to beat the strawberry blonde stash.
It's a little weird. All right.
It's weird at the beginning. It was janky, like at the get-go.
All right. We've enjoyed this conversation. Thank you guys. We'll be back on Monday with a topic to be decided. Have a good weekend. Have
happy Friday.
Some good adventures. Yeah, the weekend is here.
Woo.
Enjoy it.
We made it.
Bye.